For the power of truth, this is the Glad Report.
Hello and welcome. This is the very first episode of the year 2024 and I'm super stoked. I am your host, Glad, short for Gladys, but you can call me Ntalasha. Happy New Year to you all. Today's episode is dedicated to the Zambian economic space, reflecting on the year 2023, giving you background on what's been happening in the years prior, explaining a little bit of what's to come, and just filling you in on what's happening right now. Things that affect you, things that affect me. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to delve, to dive, to indulge myself in this topic. In discussing the Zambian economic space today, I cannot run away from reflecting on the economic history of the country. Between the years 2000 and 2014, Zambia, as many other African countries in sub-Saharan Africa, was experiencing a commodity supercycle. What do I mean by that? Prices for commodities were higher than the typical pricing range that they existed. So countries were experiencing really good growth rates because their growth was being fueled by the funds coming in from their commodities. By commodities, I mean copper, I mean gold. So all those minerals that they have were helping fund economic progress in the country, as was the case for Zambia. So between the years 2000 and 2014. Around 2014, the Chinese demand, the Chinese appetite for African commodities reduced. In that regard, a lot of countries were pushing for infrastructural development, but they did not have the fund base that they previously had prior, as was the case for Zambia. They continued on infrastructural splurge, even though they didn't have the money. So between 2015 and 2018 in Zambia, external debt as a share of GDP tripled. Over the years 2015 and 2021, public debt as a share of GDP went from 66% in 2015 to 113% in 2021. Also, we were paying back these bonds, though we skipped a payment during the COVID-19 pandemic era in November of 2020, which made us the first country to default on debt during that era. So obviously we caused quite the hullabaloo in that regard and in that period. So international community, all eyes were on us. So looking forward, so then came the end of 2021, where at the time, which is at the time of the elections, 40% of Zambians were reporting that they were eating either smaller or fewer meals, which was problematic in and of itself. 25% inflation rate, which at the time was the highest since 1998. A very stark statistic. So obviously the economics at the time definitely pushed people to vote out the incumbent at the time, who was His Excellency Edgar Lungu. So in this era, they have been tasked with having to sort out this economic conundrum. So the finance minister in the Patriotic Front era, Wadi Ngandu, when he did notice that there was a problem, he did invite the International Monetary Fund to help us, though International Monetary Fund had told Zambia to take out subsidies and just to start behaving themselves in the debt, just not borrowing as much as they were. They wanted them to stop, which would have been atypical from what the PF was used to. It would have been unusual. So they started the process, but they didn't finish it. They handed over the baton to the UPND and the new Minister of Finance. So, as we know, in 2021, in August 1st of August 2021 is when we were able to secure the IMF deal, the $1.3 billion IMF deal, which is to be paid through over a period of 38 months. And if you count, that should end up in 2025, October, around that time. The first consignment was about $188 million, so it will come in a set of in a series of payments, not all at once, but a series of payments. Just with the IMF coming into the picture, it definitely was a good step in the right direction. Even though people can paint the IMF to say, oh goodness, the IMF has no human face, oh goodness, look at how the IMF never supports the idea of subsidies, even though it cushions people. The IMF has financial street cred. Just having the IMF give you a thumbs up or a gold star is a step in the right direction for international donor community, donors and debtors. Yes, so in that regard, we were just investigating our debt. Looking at the debt, the PF had only admitted to half of the actual amount that we owe the Chinese. So there was, I guess, a few Chinese whispers. Yeah, there were Chinese whispers. So they told us one thing, somebody heard the other thing and told the other thing. So people weren't honest about the amount of the Chinese debt. So yes, but then only when the new era, the new dawn government came into the picture did we know the true scale of the problem. Yes. So coming into the year 2023, we had a Paris summit, where donors sat down, donors from the G20. The G20 created a common framework which is supposed to basically help countries in debt distress. Zambia is one of those countries they want to help. And if anything, Zambia is being used as an example that many countries will look to and say, did the common framework work? Did the common framework not work? Our president, His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, has really been saying a lot of positive statements with regards to the common framework. Hopefully the common framework can actually be as positive and as polite in the way it interacts with the Zambian people. Anyway, so 2023, they had a Paris summit on financial impact in Paris, June 22nd to June 23rd. Here, we were able to discuss $8 billion. In its entirety, Zambia has about $30 billion worth of debt. 60% of it, which is just under about $20 billion, is external. So central government external debt is about $20 billion, which is 60%, and roughly 10 billion, which is about 40%, is domestic. So you owe it to like Zesco, Zanaco, yeah, people like that, entities like that. So in that regard, we have at this summit where we had the Paris Club as well as the G20 countries, we were mainly focusing on $8 billion worth of debt. This is debt that's public. So again, in the external frame, it's public and private. So private bondholders could be like in the frame of BlackRock, and I'll come to that just now, as well as the public ones, which are like a country's governments that loaned money out to Zambia. So on the table was $8 billion. $8 billion, $1.7 billion was knocked out of the question. Why? Because the Chinese claimed that that money actually came from a private source. Though people questioned, because when they looked into that debt, they said, oh goodness, why is it being knocked out of the picture? But you still want us to pay, when really that amount was guaranteed by Sinosure, which is the state-run insurance company. Anyway, so $6.3 billion was on the table. $6.3 billion, $4.2 billion is of the Chinese, and then the rest of it is of France and India. So, and luckily, we were able to secure a deal that allowed for the payback period to be extended over a 40-year period. So 2023 plus 40, you can do the math. Also, we will only be paying 1% interest until the year 2025, where the IMF will come in and gauge the situation in Zambia to say, okay, if things are going well, they will then switch to 4% interest thereafter. Yeah, so in that regard, things are looking rather positive. So yes, also as the year will unfold, we are supposed to discuss a $3 billion US euro bond before the end of the first quarter of this year 2024. So yes, things are looking positive in that light. One thing that really inspired me was, or I found quite uplifting rather, was the protests that happened outside BlackRock offices in the US, where people protested. They were chanting, "Eh hey, excuse my saying, eh hey, Zambia's debt has got to go. Eh hey, BlackRock monopoly. Zambia's not your colony."
Hey, hey, ho, ho! Zambia's debt has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho! Zambia's debt has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho! Zambia's debt has got to go. BlackRock monopoly. Zambia's not your colony.
Very inspirational chant, a protest, a peaceful protest, but just people echoing the statistics of the country, saying, oh, people are servicing debt, but they're spending less on the health industry. I'll definitely share the video. Quite inspirational. So people are protesting because BlackRock is a private bondholder that has refused to forgive the Zambian debt or even just change the measures. Even when even when in 2022 in September, a group of over 100 economists and academics sat down with BlackRock and another private lender. They sat down with them, including Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs was part of the economists who sat down with them, to just basically urge them, plead with them to forgive the debt of Zambia, but to no avail, unfortunately. So BlackRock is a bit stubborn in that regard. So yeah, in interest arrears we have about just over $1 billion US. So it's quite terrible, but at least there is progress being made in just this whole debt discussion. With regards to our Kwacha's instability is mainly being owed to the state of inflation in the country, as well as the Kwacha being, the Kwacha is basically what people mainly look at. This is the first thing that the people look at when they're trying to look at how much confidence they are to place in our country, in our country's economy. So the Kwacha, what influences our currency is one thing being inflation. So if inflation is high, if inflation is continuously high, the Kwacha's value reduces because the buying power is at the mercy of inflation. Yes. So inflation was actually 12% in the previous year. It ended up being 12%, even though the Minister of Finance in his budget address for the year 2023, he wanted the inflation to exist between 6 and 8% band, but actually it went a little haywire. So he did report on that. And he also reported on the fact that the central bank, which is the Bank of Zambia, actually has tried to raise the policy rate just to quench the fires of inflation in that regard. Also, what affects the Kwacha is forex markets, foreign exchange markets. So the demand, if there's more demand for the dollar in the country and less for the Kwacha's value is at the mercy of those markets. Also, the issue of balance of trade, exports, imports, what are the values? Yes, in that frame. So the Kwacha has really been at the mercy of the forex markets as well as inflation. And the balance of trade, which is mainly driven by copper, because that's our main foreign exchange cow here in the country. It's what brings in the dollars. Yes, with regards to the fuel and electricity, an instruction came in from the IMF in our accepting the deal. The International Monetary Fund said we need to take out subsidies, of which we did, and they wanted the amounts to come in to about $800 million. If we were to cut down the subsidies, is what we would be saving on. Yes, so in that regard. So with regards to the monthly pricing system of the Energy Regulation Board, the reason we are dancing the tango with the Energy Regulation Board's prices is because the Energy Regulation Board, one, is setting the price, it's like it's cost reflective in the sense, number one, no subsidies, and it reflects the market. So wherever they're getting the fuel from, dictates what we pay here. So one, it's what is the exchange rate. So if the dollar is, if we're paying 20 kwacha for the dollar, for $1, it becomes more expensive also to buy fuel. Yes, and of course even the price of oil changes, it fluctuates. Yes, indeed. Well, in terms of just like an outlook for the year, the inflation rate is also hoped to stay they wanted to stay within the 6 and 8% band, as he did in his address, parliamentary address, for this year's budget 2024, from the 1st of January to 2020 to the end of the year, which is 31st December. He still wants inflation to exist within that band. I will be doing further breakdowns of the economics of the country, but until later, thank you very much for tuning in. I'm obliged to you for hearing me. Thank you.
For the power of truth, this is the Glad Report.